Dexter was dressed like a cowboy. "Why do you have a gym bag?" his wife asked him. "I'm Doc Holliday from Gunsmoke, and this is my medical bag." Marcia was wearing a wedding dress with a veil and tiara. Dexter knew that meant more than just putting on a costume. It was done for Art Russell's benefit. He had heard that Art was going to wear a tuxedo to the corporate Halloween party they were headed to. Once there, Marcia spent more time with Art than she did with Dexter. When she danced with Art, their costumes made them look like a married couple. Art had divorced his wife, and it had only finally happened last month. The party was in full swing. Marcia was finishing dancing with Art when Dexter approached him. He stuck a hypodermic needle into Art's chest and injected the contents. It only took a few seconds before Art fell to the floor and died a few minutes later. Marcia started screaming, and people ran to see what had happened. Dexter went to the front door and locked it. He took his pistols out of their holsters and fired them into the air, letting everyone know that the guns were real and loaded. "Sit down and be quiet, and you won't get hurt. Try to be heroic, and you will die. I know many of you have already called the police about all of this, as I can hear the sirens wailing. My name is Detective Bruce Burns. When the call came in, I rushed over as fast as I could. You see, for the last 10 years, I've been investigating Halloween murders. The department brought me on 4 years ago. The reasons were always the same. On Halloween, often at a party, a man was murdered. The killer used a hypodermic needle stuffed with a large dose of rat poison. Once the poison entered the bloodstream, the victims didn't stand a chance. Catching the killer was so difficult because we could never find enough evidence to connect the murders. A big part of the problem was that he or she only killed one person a year. We assumed they were always in suits, which made it easier for them to escape. A couple times, a person in a sad clown costume showed up at the same parties where the crimes were committed. However, the police never found the clown. We had no idea where or why the killer would strike. Sometimes it was even in a neighboring town. The only thing we could be sure of was that it kept happening. The victim was most likely a married man with a high income. It had to have happened just before Halloween, and it involved a hypodermic needle. The party was held on the 3rd floor of the Elks Lodge. It was reported that one Art Russell had just been murdered by one Dexter Manowitz. Witnesses said he'd stabbed him in the chest with a hypodermic needle. When I got to the building, I called the 3rd floor extension. "I'd like to speak to Dexter," I said to the person who answered. "This is Dexter. I'm willing to tell my story, but I'll only do it once. I want to talk to Detective Bruce Burns. I've been following him, and he seems like a reasonable man." "I'm Detective Burns, Dexter. How can we meet without further violence? The building's surrounded, and there's no way out. Why don't you let the men go and come out yourself? Then we can talk." "No, I don't think so. You can come up here with a tape recorder. I'll tell you my whole story, but I need your word that you won't have a gun or any other weapon on you. If I see any of them, or if your SWAT team tries to come in before we finish talking, I will start shooting people. I don't want anyone else getting hurt. I'll come in through the main entrance. Please just calm down and don't hurt anyone." When I entered the party room, I saw about 60 people in suits. They looked excited, but not too scared. The door to the fire escape was closed from the inside. There were no windows on this floor, so the SWAT team couldn't fire a single shot without breaking in. "Close the door behind you," said the man I thought was Dexter. "Unzip your jacket and turn around." "Dexter, why don't you let these people go? You're holding me hostage," I replied, following his orders. Dexter really didn't look like a man to be afraid of. He was short and weighed about 70 pounds. No one would ever think he was a killer. "Look, people, I'm not here to hurt anyone unless I have no choice. I'm the Halloween killer, and I'm going to tell Detective Burns my story. Those who want to leave, you can leave. Those who stay will hear about all the murders firsthand and why they happened. Those who want to leave, come out one at a time through the back fire escape," Dexter said, addressing the crowd of people. "You little asshole, you don't have the guts to shoot anybody," said a drunk named Jack Randall, who lunged at Dexter pretending to be a hero. Dexter shot him in the leg and everyone screamed. Jack fell to the floor, squirming in pain. His wife grabbed a tablecloth and wrapped it around his leg. "You dumbass. I told you I'd shoot you if anyone provoked me. I could have killed you. But I know you were sleeping with Marcia, and I wanted your wife to find out." Marcia cried. The look on Jack's wife's face said that she knew Dexter was telling the truth. She slapped her husband hard across the face before turning to Marcia. "You bitch!" she screamed across the room. Another man spoke up and asked if they could still leave. "Go," Dexter said, waving his gun toward the emergency exit. "The SWAT team will be outside the door. Tell them not to shoot. Make sure you give them all the information about what you observed here before they let you go," I said to the nervous man who wanted to leave. It surprised me that out of 60 people, only 20 actually left. I guess they really wanted to hear about what was going on in Dexter's life. Jack Randall left to treat a gunshot wound. His wife decided to stay. I later learned that they were close neighbors of Dexter and Marcia. Dexter started out by giving me a lot of information. He and Marcia had been married for 30 years, had 5 grown children and 6 grandchildren. Dexter was an accountant and had been since he graduated from college. As he continued to talk, he revealed that he was 31 years old when he met Marcia at the local library. She was only 18 at the time. Marcia was having trouble keeping the books, and Dexter asked if she needed help. At the time, she was a stocky girl with braces. They became friends and started dating after she graduated from high school. She was his first and only real girlfriend. He thought he was her first and only, but much later realized that was far from true. Dexter said he treated her like gold and gave her everything she wanted. When she became pregnant, Dexter was very happy to marry her. 4 years later, they had 3 children. Marcia was a homemaker as Dexter made a good living for his family. After the youngest of the first 3 children was born, Marcia told Dexter that she wanted to work. It would give her the opportunity to be out in the community more, and they could always use the extra money. Apparently, she met an old friend who told her about the estate sale. The couple talked about it and both agreed that it would be good for her. At first, she took evening classes. After she got her real estate license, she got a job at Russell Real Estate. Dexter talked about how busy their family's life was. He worked 9 to 5 most of the time, although Marcia worked off the clock. She spent many evenings at her job. In the next 3 years, they had 2 more children. Dexter's mother lived just a few houses down the street from them and was available to watch the children on short notice. As the children grew older, life became more hectic. Dexter and Marcia tried their best to attend all the special events the children went to. Often Dexter had to go alone. Their children went to scouts, bands, and sports. He said he didn't really mind because he loved his children and his wife. After Marcia started working, she went on a strict diet and started exercising. She lost a little weight before becoming pregnant with their 4th child. Once he was born, she went back to the diet and exercise program. She did the same after the birth of her 5th child. That's when she had her fallopian tubes tied, as they decided 5 children would be enough. Dexter said that she actually looked good, and their sex life even improved. He mentioned that when they first made love, they both felt awkward. He said that Marcia was the aggressor in their sexual relationship. She talked to her friends, and they advised her to try something new. He mentioned that he was a little reluctant to have other sex with Marcia, but since she did it for him, he did the same for her. The one thing Dexter said about his sex life was that Marcia was always ready and waiting. Dexter. Over the years, we've had a dozen people come in calling themselves the Halloween Killer. They all wanted to be famous for some nefarious reason. I'm here now because you used a hypodermic syringe to kill a man. Why should we believe you're a real killer and not just some wannabe? I'll tell you everything you need to know, starting with Joe Bussey, Dexter said. Joe wasn't the first victim, Dexter, I replied. I know. John Kane was, but it all started because of Joe. 11 years ago, Marcia wanted to work at Russell Real Estate. They threw a party at the Holiday Inn to celebrate their 40 years in business. Art's father was running the business at the time. How does that correlate? I asked, trying to put all the pieces of the mosaic together. Art Sr. died 5 years ago, and Art Jr. became president. Marcia wanted to go, but one of the kids had a ball game. I told her to go ahead. After the game, I ran to the party. They had invited former clients to this party, as well as their fellow employees from other branches. I wasn't familiar with most of the people, just a few from Marcia's office. When I got there, Marcia was at the pool in a split swimsuit. She seemed to be having a good time, so I didn't bother her. Instead, I sat down at the counter and ordered a soda, since I'm not a drinker. I tried it, but I didn't like it. Go on, I said. Anyway, I sat next to Joe Bussey. I'd never met him before. He was pretty drunk and was saying something raucous while watching Marcia. He told me she was the best girl he'd ever had. I was shocked. I couldn't believe he was talking about my Marcia. Apparently, he worked with John Kane, who bought the house from Marcia. He told Joe that she was giving extra perks. She entertained clients until the deal was closed. Joe said that since he was looking for a house, he went to Marcia. He was treated the same way. She slept with him 4 times until the deal was closed. After that, she never wanted to see him again. I was completely speechless and couldn't think, Dexter said, as he looked around the room and paused. This guy, Joe, told me it happened 7 years ago. Honestly, I didn't know what to think. Had she really been cheating on me all this time? I needed to find out more, but until then, I was going to give myself the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Sighs. So what convinced you that your wife had cheated on you, and why did you decide to take revenge after all these years? I asked. Marcia hadn't changed. She still treated me and the kids the same. One night after she left to show the house, I went up to the attic above the garage and pulled out all of our past records. We never threw anything away in case we needed them later. I went back to when Marcia started working and looked through her day planners. In them were written down all her appointments and sales. It was almost like a diary of her life, everyone she saw and talked to. I came across John Kane. I read how many times his name appeared in her diary. She also had an index on the back with information about a potential client. I noticed the letters after some of the names. Then some, but not as many, had the letters HS in them. It took me quite a while to figure out the code, but when I did, everything fell into place. A stood for appointment, P stood for potential customer, and S stood for sold. NS and HS meant no sex, and there was sex. One thing I noticed about the HS notes was that a home buyer or potential home buyer had more or as much to lose as Marcia. So, tell me why you chose John Kane as your first victim. Tell me something you couldn't just read about in the papers. Marcia sat on the couch crying during the interview. One of her sisters sat with her. Most of the people present just stared at her, waiting for the story to continue. They continued to eat and drink, which struck me as odd. After reading a few names in the diary, the first thing I came across was John Kane. At first, I thought of Joe Bussey's murder, but I'd talked to him at a party just a couple months ago and didn't want to leave any clues that might lead back to me. So what was your plan, Dexter? I went online and found how to concoct a poison that could be used in a hypodermic syringe to kill a man quickly. I walked into the pharmacy part of town and picked up some disposable syringes. I didn't care who used them. It would just lead the police to some drug addict. I went to the store and bought a costume that could be found anywhere. I chose a sad clown mask because the thought of Marcia doing those things made me sad. It was candy night, and I rounded the corner of the house where John Kane lived. So, I did some extra work with all the victims. I didn't want any big surprises, I just wanted revenge. Since I'm short, I could pass for a kid in a suit. I waited until there were no kids at his door and yelled, "Trick or treat." When John opened, I stuck the needle in his chest. I saw the look on his face as he fell to the floor. I quickly turned around and headed back to my car. When I heard the screaming, I thought it was his wife. I rushed home and put the car in the garage. Then I took off my suit and took candy to my younger children. I didn't know if John had died or not until I read about it in the paper the next day. So how did you feel when you took that life, Dexter? I asked. Fear of getting caught, but no remorse. He had sex with my wife many times. Here, I have her day planner where she wrote it down. Dexter pulled a stack of diaries from his gym bag over the years. "You can't take these," Marcia screamed. "They're my personal items. I'm sorry, Mrs. Manowitz. They're evidence in at least 10 murders. You'll get them back after your husband's trial." Marcia began to cry again while her sister and one of her friends comforted her. It was amazing how quiet the crowd was. What happened next? Life went on as usual. I spent time planning my next victim, which was Joe Bussey. Other than that, it was business as usual. I can't help but wonder why you didn't just kill Marcia, or at least divorce her. I can't say I haven't thought about it. In fact, I thought about it a lot. The problem is, I loved her, really loved her. She was a wonderful mother and a good wife. There was no way I could hurt her. At times I hated her when I thought about it, but she never flaunted it or brought it home. She never knew I guessed what she was up to. "Okay, Dexter, tell me about your second victim," I asked, needing further confirmation that he was the killer. "You already know it was Joe Bussey. He worked in the same consulting office as John. By picking him next, the investigators were busy looking for a connection. They never thought about going back 7 years to when they both bought their homes from Marcia." "How did you set all this up?" I asked. I'd gone through the police files so many times I knew them by heart. Right now, I was still a little doubtful that Dexter was the man who'd committed all those murders. "They had a Halloween dress-up day at the office. No one paid any attention to the clown who walked in. It was lunchtime, and they were all hanging around the office. I waited in the restroom stall until Joe came in. When he turned around, I plunged the needle into his chest. He fell backwards onto the sink. A few people saw me come out, but I was wearing a suit. By the time they found Joe, I was long gone and was wearing regular clothes. I went back to my work and no one recognized anything." Was Marcia surprised when she heard about these deaths? "No, not right away. After all, she sold those houses 7 years ago. A couple of names that came up later she recognized," Dexter said. "Give me an example." "Well, number 6 was a congressman named Bill Elliott. I remember her saying she worked on his campaign. Although she didn't sell him the house, she slept with him. His name was in her day planner. As far as I know, she slept with him twice." "How did you get close enough to kill him?" "It wasn't that hard. He attended a few Halloween events. I was just following his schedule, and I saw him when he came to the middle school to perform. All the students were dressed in costumes, so it was easy to blend in with the crowd. The funny thing about restrooms, everyone has to use them sometime, so, I changed my costume that time. After 5 kills using a clown outfit, I decided to go dressed up as Jason, which was so popular with the kids." "Why do you think you got away with it for so long?" Investigators kept looking in the wrong places. After eliminating John Kane, they had nothing. Then they tried to find a connection between John and Joe. Since they worked together, they kept following competitors or employees of their office. After that came Terrell Bosley, a professional athlete. If you look in the diary, you will see that Marcia showed him several houses. She slept with him twice, but never sold him a house. He just used her. That's why I made him number 3. He was the only one I spent 2 needles on. Being an athlete, I wanted to make sure I used enough poison." "Where did you kill him, Dexter?" "It was in a motel room. Even though he was married, he was picking up white women after practice and having sex with them. There was a Halloween party in the banquet room. Terrell had nothing to do with it. He was just there for the sex. I was dressed as a clown and used my card to open his door. At this time, he was having some woman. I approached him from behind and stuck both needles in his back. The woman screamed as he fell on top of her. I went down the stairs to the party room and jumped out the door before the police showed up. They were busy looking for the husbands of the various women he'd slept with. Fortunately, they didn't know about Marsh. Of course, they had been together for about 6 years before his death." Dexter continued to voice his list of murders. Some in their homes, others at gatherings or parties. He gave details that were unknown to the general public. Dexter was definitely the Halloween killer. "Okay, Dexter, so why did it end tonight? Why did you kill Art Russell and let everyone see it? Why don't you continue your bloody fun? There are more names here," I asked, flipping through the pages of the day planner. "It's because of Marcia. As long as I felt she loved me, I could ignore the adultery. But things have changed." "What do you mean?" "After Art Russell Sr. died, Marcia took a job as secretary to Art Jr., and things seemed to be getting better. I looked at the last couple dailies, and she wasn't having sex with clients anymore. She had appointments, but I didn't notice an S next to the names. However, I did notice that she was seeing her boss quite a bit. As I mentioned, he had recently divorced his wife. This made me wonder if Marcia was dating him. Our youngest graduated from college this summer and now lives on her own. We don't have any more kids at home, and some have moved to other states. I came home early one day. Marcia must not have heard me pull into the garage. I looked at my phone and noticed the light bulb was on. That meant Marcia was using it. I picked up the phone and listened. She was talking to Art and told him that now that all the kids were out of the house, she was going to leave me to marry him. I was devastated. I had put up with her all these years because I loved her, and now she was going to leave me. He turned to take another look at his wife. Marcia awed, but said nothing. I saw the pain in his eyes. I heard her tell Art that she was going to go to the Halloween party in her wedding dress and he should wear a tuxedo. He told her that after the party they were going to tell me about the divorce. She kept telling him how much she loved him and couldn't live without him. That's when I decided to end his life since he had ended mine. Within weeks of that phone call, I changed the beneficiary on all of my insurance. I transferred all the funds I had to my children. I asked my attorney to change my will. Of course, I knew that half of everything we owned together would go to Marcia, but my half would be divided among the children. If they wanted to give it to their mother, that would be their choice. Dexter, I'm still surprised you let Marcia live. It was because of her love for Art Russell. I don't understand, I replied. I saw a program on TV where a man was asked why he killed his lover and not his wife. He replied that if he had shot her, she would have been hurt. If he had killed someone she loved, she would have been in pain for the rest of her life, Dexter explained. She doesn't have love anymore, you see. And the world knows what a whore she was, so she's going to suffer for the rest of her life. And what about you? After this, you'll go to prison, and you'll probably be on death row for a few years. You'll have to go through the pain, too. No, that's not going to happen, he said, raising his gun. Dexter, you promised you wouldn't shoot anyone else. Aren't you a man of your word? I asked, trying to dissuade him from shooting anyone, including himself. He reached into his gym bag and pulled out a hypodermic needle. In the blink of an eye, he plunged it into his heart. Marcia, I've always loved you. Now you can explain all this to the kids, Dexter said, dropping the gun and falling to the floor. I reached in and pulled the needle out, but it was too late. Dexter Manowitz had killed himself the same way he had killed his wife's lovers. Marcia screamed again, but everyone just looked at her and shook their heads. Her sister was the only one who tried to calm her down. I opened the door and the SWAT team led everyone outside. Paramedics covered Dexter's body and later took it to the morgue. In the months that followed, the story stayed on television. Marcia's life became a living hell. She had to sell her house and leave town. She even gave back her maiden name so no one would know who she was. Her children wanted nothing to do with her. They thought it was her fault that their father acted this way. None of them bequeathed anything to her. As for me, the department credited me with catching the Halloween killer. I didn't deserve any honors, but the mayor wanted to make headlines. I often wonder how many other men are like Dexter. He was willing to put up with his wife's infidelity because he loved her. Epilogue. It's been a year since the murder last Halloween. Art Russell's ex-wife had taken back the business. He'd never transferred ownership, and she still owned half of it. I was sitting at my desk getting ready to go home when I got the call. A woman had been found with a hypodermic needle in her chest, but she was still alive. I couldn't believe it as I rushed to the address given. It was Marcia Dunworthy, formerly Marcia Manowitz. When I arrived, she was already being put into an ambulance. A neighbor who was watering her lawn remembered the license plate number of the car leaving Marcia's house. The entire department was on the scene looking for her. When they stopped the car, they discovered it was Jack Randall's wife. He was one of the men who had slept with Marcia. She's to blame too. She ruined my marriage and my family, and she should pay for what she did. I don't understand why she was never charged with anything. Beverly Randall, charged with attempted murder, is now awaiting trial. As for Marcia Dunworthy Manowitz, she's in a coma. Doctors don't know if she will ever come out of it. The poison Beverly used destroyed her brain cells, but left her heart normal. I guess now all we have to do is wait until next Halloween and hope there are no more copycat murders.